The EU has a mutual defence clause in effect. Article 42.7 of the Treaty on European Union says, if a member state is the victim of armed aggression on its territory, the other member states shall have towards it an obligation of aid and assistance by all the means in their power. But then there's a get-out clause. This shall not prejudice the specific character of the security and defence policy of certain member states. And I wonder, when I look at that, do those 4 states think that in circumstances when, I don't know, you were attacked, they would be able to say, well, we're sorry, we can't help Latvia because if we help Latvia, we have to help the country that's attacking it? Or is there an evolution in the way that the remaining European neutral and non-aligned countries are thinking about neutrality? So, as the EU debates having a bigger role in defence, is that compatible with the traditional notions of neutrality and non-alignment that some member states have?
Well, yeah. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Bond. I really want to always express in public, Mr. Bond, either if I'm a friend or a foe or a villain. Yeah. But I guess I hope I'm a friend.
Yeah. Just as long as you don't expect me to die, okay?
Well, I would just start with that thank God that the sole guarantor for security, as far as I am aware, is still NATO within Europe, and it should remain in that way. So the Article 5, and it's totally different structure on the responsibilities for the member states in particular. When it comes to the EU clause 42.7, already 42.7 means how far in the back this priority is, whereas NATO Article 5, and a certain step that leads to Article 5. So that is already just very briefly. When it comes to the neutrality within the EU in general, I have to go back in history as well, because history does matter. And well, I have to say that it is obsolete. Because, well, you mentioned Belgium, 1914. Kaiser already said that the Treaty of London is just a scrap of paper. Then it's Netherlands, 1940 as well. And with this, why I'm saying it's obsolete, because I will actually go back to State Secretary Dulles, who actually said that its neutrality is exceedingly becoming obsolete. And that is 1956. And that's where we see that since 1956, the involvement of international law, it really has gone skyrocketing in a way for the international community, what we are calling the rules-based international order. So therefore, in 21st century, somebody said that we are neutral, it's actually hypocrisy in a way. One or another way, they have an obligation when it comes to international law. UN Charter, for example, it's a fine example. They have to protect it and have to call the aggressor accountable. So therefore, this is already saying that somebody says, I'm neutral. No, you have international obligations. So that is a lie in itself. If you look from the history, if the neutrality by definition, which is, it's mainly for the smaller states to maintain their independence and sovereignty through not participation and maintaining impartiality in events. But again, at what cost? And we see the 20th century that has shown that if you sell the soul of neutrality, neutrality becomes hypocrisy. And here I'll state, maybe somebody can like it or not, the examples. Sweden selling iron ore to Nazi Germany, that was a precondition for their maintaining neutrality. Switzerland, taking care of Nazi gold. So where's their neutrality? So at some point, if we come back to 21st century, and we come when explicitly we talk on the Russian aggression, I think it's not only the neutrality is obsolete, but it's liability in a way. So coming back to what you said on the Article 42.7, yes, there are 4 member states that you can Apply maybe this escape clause, as somebody says. There is a mutual kind of responsibility, but then there's an escape clause. I think the brutality and also the nature of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, it's not just isolated conflict, it's way beyond that. And I think that is something where EU member states registered that. The fine example of that is Sweden and Finland joining NATO. This comes back to what I started with, that thank God NATO is the sole guarantor of defense and security in Europe. And it also signals that Article 42.7 is slightly hollow. So that is the decision for Sweden and Finland to join the NATO. But of course, also when it comes to previously mentioned countries, Ireland and Austria itself, their leaders have articulated that they're not 100% neutral. And increasingly so because you cannot be neutral when there's hybrid attacks, hybrid warfare fought. You don't see your enemy, so you can be neutral in a way. You are affected by different means. Disinformation, cyber domain. That is also articulated by the Article 42.7 as can constitute to common security and defense. So with this, well, the Article 42.7 has been activated once so far, 2015, terrorist attack in France. So we see the effects of it as well, how it's used in practice. So I don't want to, well, I'd rather go to the Q&A session because I generally believe the neutrality is obsolete. But one very important thing when it comes to neutrality that is, well, again, when it's obsolete, is actually what I've determined, protect your candidates. And this is very crucial. This goes back to the 90s. We saw the war in Balkans. After the war, EU reached out and granted the candidate status to numerous countries in the Balkans. But for the first time, the candidate country status is given a country that is at hot war. And this, by this, you cannot say I'm neutral, because it will be, you know, the hypocrisy by definition. Because you're saying, okay, we grant you candidate status while you fight for your survival, but for time being, since you become the member, we're neutral towards your, you know, sovereignty and territorial integrity. So by this design, Ireland, Cyprus, Malta, they're no neutral countries. They have actually obligation, because candidate status, it's not something in a limbo. It's actually, I see it already as a membership by other means. So if we're generous about our credibility with EU, then stating that we are neutral when it comes to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, we should carefully choose our words.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with that. Julian, you want